Painter Nola McConnan is unapologetically herself in the best ways, determined, self-reliant, and charmingly fierce. She has supported herself as an artist throughout her career with mentorship and support, despite failing grade 13 French, and she turned a rec room into a room of her own. Please take note during the conversation when she talks about Sheilah, that's one of her older sisters. And because of time restrictions, I wasn't able to include the amazing account of her family's connection with Emily Carr. Here's my conversation with Nola. I really appreciate you making time today because I'm looking forward to hearing your story.
Well, thank you.
And I'm just going to launch right in.
Okay.
And this is kind of a big question. You could take it in any direction you want, but I wanted to start by asking you how you became a painter.
I became a painter because I failed grade 13 French, which destroyed my scholarships to Queen's, Western, and U of T. I had an 82% average in 1968, which is like, that's something else, man. I was a prefect and a member of Reach for the Top. I was everything else. And I went through 56 job interviews and 7 jobs and said to my father, Dad, there's one thing I can do really well, and I can draw. I had 91% in my non-credited grade 13 art class. Life in Scarborough in the 1960s.
Options were limited.
Yes. Dad was a little bit more supportive than Mom. Mom was not supportive at all. Sidebar, the reason Sheilah got to go to OCA was because my grandmother and Joan McDonald gave her the money. It was nothing to do with Mom or Dad. Joan was dead by the time I came along. And even though everybody knew I could draw better than Sheilah, that was not supposed to be what I was doing. So that's why I became an artist. Thus, I didn't become a teacher, a nurse, or a bank teller. And oh, by the way, I also scored 84% on my LSATs.
So law could have been in the cards too.
Law could have been in the cards. So there you are. That's why I'm an artist.
So that's it's kind of an explanation by default. So you ended up there because other options weren't open to you. But how did you feel about becoming an artist as a choice?
I was never without a paper or pencil, but the problem was art was not offered as a career option. But I knew that I could draw. And I knew that what drove me to doing stuff was drawing. In grade 5, we had a project. And myself and my fellow, he turned up in industrial design. We both decided that we were going to be in the design arts world. Rob was going to design boats. He did. I was going to be an equestrian who drew pictures of horses, which I did and do very well for many people. I was 10. 10. That's when Andrew Wyeth withdrew Jamie Wyeth from school. That's when NC Wyeth withdrew Andrew Wyeth from school. So at the age of 10, you are no longer being taught. You are now teaching yourself. Every artist on the planet is self-taught because you have to teach yourself how to do the basic skill set.
So what did that mean to you as you were going to art school? How did you feel
I was the last class that went into the Ontario College of Art where there was an expectation that you would be able to make your living drawing and painting for others. That was in 1971.
So what was the transition then? People after?
The problem was that photography had taken over and it was the new hot thing to be doing. And so it was no longer the golden age of illustration. Let's put it that way. I went in when the foundation year at OCA had expectations they were going to lose 50% of their foundation year. The year I went in, there were 1,500 applicants from across the country, 320 acceptances into first year, 160 in second year, and 40 of us graduated. There was a transition at OCA, and it's gone on in all kinds of post-secondary stuff, that the government paid more for colleges and universities, specifically for colleges and university rather than technical school. I went to a technical school. I'm a trained technician. It's a very different mind space. I'm trying to satisfy the needs of my clients rather than my needs per se.
And would you say it's also because your subject matter is portraiture? Like when you talk about illustration and portraiture for a client is different than, I guess, like art for art's sake? Is that the difference? Okay.
When I'm doing my stuff, right now I'm doing a series of pen and ink illustrations of maps for the King Township Historic Society. I'm attempting to fulfill their needs for their illustrations. When I'm doing all of the work for heritage sports art, I'm attempting to fulfill the needs of New York, Canton, and Cooperstown, which is very different from me attempting to satisfy my needs or what I want to do. I know what I like to do, and I like to draw, and I like to paint, but that may not be what other people want. It's a very confused situation, so to speak, because I am really well respected for what I can do across the board. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the arts world thinks that I'm pretty fabulous, because I'm not being self-indulgent in doing what I want to do and then telling everybody else that they have to appreciate what I want to do. It's kind of a flip.
So in your daily practice then, do you balance the work that you do for clients as well as work that you do for yourself?
Yep. I basically am working in the studio from about 8 o'clock to 8:30 in the morning until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, unless I have to do gardening and it's too hot. Then I take off on my bicycle.
Where are you living right now?
Oh, I live in East York. I live in Parkview Hill. I don't know if you know where that is or not.
I kind of situate everything relative to Toronto, if it's in
I
Ontario.
live in Toronto.
It's Toronto. Okay. But it sounds like a nicer part of Toronto where you can get out on your bike and you can garden, and it's outside the city or it's in the city?
It's in the city. It's in the former borough of East York. In local terms, I live on Woodbine Avenue, but it's called Woodbine Heights. And about 200 yards north of me, it ends in a 140-foot fall down to the East Don River. So I live in kind of like this isolated little peninsula of quiet. When my daughter's father and I lived together, we lived in a much less nice area, and I finally had to put my foot down because I was earning as much or more as he was, and my drafting board was in the corner of the bedroom, and it was not fun. And the phone across the road was the prostitute phone. There were 3 bus routes that went past the front door. It was the main drag from the Woodbine fire station over to the OHC housing that was always on fire. So I went looking for a new house. I found the house at 20 to 12 on a Friday night with a sale sign in front of it. And I phoned the real estate agent I'd been working with, and I said, "Why haven't you shown me this house? It's a wreck."
It's just for us.
It's just for us. He says, "Oh, it's because it's not for sale." I said, "Well, it's got an A.E. LePage for sale sign in front of it." And so he calls me back about 15 minutes later. He says, it's not listed yet. They're having an open house tomorrow. Please don't go in, I said, crossing my eyes, my fingers, and my arms. I will not set foot in the house. I sent my ex-husband, who was colorblind and deaf, in, but did have some kind of real estate background. He'd done something in that. He'd never been successful at it, but he'd done it. He goes in, he comes out, and he says, even I could see how bad it is.
Oh, boy.
I phoned my mother-in-law and said, Marty, can you come with me? Because I think I might have found a house over in that neighborhood. And she said, okay, I can do that, dear. I make an appointment to see the house at 9 a.m. And as we walk up, I said, Marty, it's got one major sales feature. And she says, what's that? And I said, that's a magnolia tree on the front lawn. We went in, and as we're going in, she says, oh, by the way, dear, this is one of the ones I did for an NHA, National Mortgage and Housing. My mother-in-law was one of the first female graduates from engineering at U of T. She really didn't think I was great to start off with, but eventually she decided, after her son had proved to be a total jackass on a number of different levels, that really I was the daughter she'd wanted. Sorry, Sarah. I don't think I'm giving you the expected arts answers.
This is great.
The sales feature for the house was the magnolia. It's a standard 2-bedroom post-war bungalow, but down at the front of the house, it was a finished recreation room with a wooden floor and 3 windows. And I said, look, I finally got a studio. It's a room of my own. I came upstairs. I handed the real estate agent a check. Marty said, I'll cover it. I said, it's a loan. It's not a gift. She said, oh, well, now, dear. I said, it's a loan, not a gift. We just have to bridge this. And I handed him the check, signed all the papers, walked out the front door. And the local guy who'd been buying up the wrecked houses in the neighborhood was walking up the front porch. He says, what the hell are you doing here? And I said, I just bought it. They didn't forgive me. I've lived here for over 40 years now. They never forgave me. But I have a wonderful studio.
Is it still in the same place? It's the rec room downstairs?
Oh, of course. Alex's father departed. I stayed. I got this agreement with a guy called Scott Silcox of Heritage Sports Art. Alex's father was being really a pain. And so he figured I was going to get rid of the house in my studio. And I thought, not happening. And I went to the bank manager that I knew, and I said, Rocco, here's what's happening. And he said, yeah, but you paid off that other mortgage. I said, yes, I did. And he said, did you say NFL? And I said, yep, that's one of the parts of this. And he said, sign here, 2% over on a variable rate.
Oh, sorry, what is NFL?
National Football League.
Oh, okay, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so he knew you were good for it.
well, he knew that I was one of the first 5 people in Canada to have signed a variable rate mortgage in 1982. Anyway, pardon me, sidebar. You're the one that played hockey, right?
Yes.
I knew that there was a reason why I really respected you from the time that you were a tiny child.
I was only 7, Nola.
I don't care. I thought it was great. I really, really did. Because you're not that much younger than I am.
No, I'm not. It's true. I let's say we experience some of the same struggles as young women.
Yes.
In a world not designed for young women.
That's true. Why is my daughter named Alexandra? My daughter is named Alexandra because she can sign things Alex. And nobody needs to know until she walks into the interview.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, all of which is a long way from why I'm an artist.
Well, I mean, it is and it isn't, because I actually was going to take this opportunity to circle back this being able to move. First of all, that you're earning as much or more than your husband, which would have been a huge thing in those days. And then
not really, he was a dud anyway.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, deservedly so, earning far more, but moving your workspace from the corner of a bedroom to your own studio
in the basement,
but a room of your own, Virginia Woolf style. What did that mean to you when you sat down and started working in your own space like that?
It meant that I had my own mental space as well as my own physical space. It meant that I had room for the actual equipment that an artist needs. That includes things like a drafting board, a work table, a credenza, a filing cabinet, shelves to put stuff on. That's what it meant. And it was a space of my own. And it also meant that I could more legitimately write off parts of my income.
Fair.
Like, it's hard to write off the bedroom.
It's a quarter of the room, which is a quarter or fifth of the.
Yes, exactly that.
Getting more value for sure.
Yeah.
And just value, and that's one of the ways that we can assign value to what we do is we create a space that's specific to it, that we dedicate to that. And that's very valuable to ourselves. For me, it is.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like you have, I'm sorry, you can't see my not too elegant office with all the shelves behind me and all the racks of 3-ring binders of lessons and portfolios and projects. All
nice.
There.
There's a very strong theme through all of the stories that you're sharing of someone who is extremely determined and self-reliant.
Yep.
How do you see that reflected in your career?
I've managed to make my living as an artist, albeit with a great deal of mentorship and support from others, rather than having to be a bank teller. I am not a high school teacher with excellent pension plans and benefits who really resents every time I have to look at these students, because I'd really rather be an artist, and I can't be because I can't afford it. I need to have my big house and my cottage and all that kind of jazz. I don't need that. What I need is the flexibility to be able to work for often for monetary dollars that other people wouldn't consider. But because I have managed to keep my costs of living in line, I can do that. And yes, I've been very determined. I've been very determined ever since I was a little kid. I had 2 big sisters who really were just old enough to teach me how I should be doing these things. I saw what Sheilah went through when she was, because when she went through it and she got the year at OCA, but that was on the condition that she went to teachers college afterwards and worked as a teacher. Yes, I was better at it than her, but she deserved to be able to have more options. I made sure I had the options. You have to understand, our father was Edwardian and our mother was damn close to it. When we lived out on Shepherd Avenue, Agincourt was still a separate town. It was not a mass of Scarborough. And the rail line going through town was 4 tracks, level crossing with a station. And beside that, on Shepherd Avenue, there was a red and white grocery store that was the leftover from the 30s and 40s. You walked up 2 steps. It was wooden, floors, general, blah, blah, blah. I remember going in there, and for some reason, I had 25 cents. Like, this was, and I wanted paper to draw on. And so we went around to the stationery department, and I found a pad of paper. And Mother was disgusted, because why wasn't I just drawing on both sides of the paper? Why did I need this pad of expensive paper? It was 25 cents. Why would I spend my money like that? And I said, because I need to make pictures, Mom. You can't do it on the back. You can't do it over top of the other stuff. Crayola crayons were a goody thing too. I caught red measles when I was in that same time period, and Sheilah and Margot taught me to read. So I was reading at a grade 8 level in grade 1 and drawing pictures.
What do you think might have happened if you had passed French class then?
I think I would have had a disastrous university career. Because unlike one of my best friends, I wasn't looking to marry a lawyer.
something else I wanted to ask you about that you mentioned near the beginning was this balance or the work that you do for clients. And I can relate to that because I do my work for clients. And so it's to please them. It's not to please me. And you get very used to making those choices. It doesn't bother me because I
Why
know
would it bother you? You've paid your mortgage. You're not sitting around begging for grants. What many, many, many people in the arts don't understand is that writing a grant application is a sales pitch.
Absolutely.
And either you're selling to the general public or you're selling to the grant people, one or the other, and you're fulfilling their needs. So when you're writing for grants, you're fulfilling a whole bunch of needs that may have nothing to do with the actual product.
Right.
I've worked enough in community arts to understand this.
Right. Right. So no matter no matter in some way to get by, we do need to be selling ourselves.
Yes. Everybody
somebody.
from the time of the Greeks and the Romans. You think that they produced those statues because they just felt like it? That was hard work. Do you think okay, here's my killer line. What is the largest supporter of the arts universally?
Okay, I know I'm totally wrong. I was going to say the Vatican.
You're close.
Okay.
All religious organizations.
Okay.
They paid people to do exquisite stuff, period. And yeah, the Vatican's kind of like the biggie.
One of the bigger ones. So that was the original grant funding agency.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Think of it like that.
Well, it's interesting because the way you responded made me realize that what bubbles for me and my situation is different. There's this edge of resentment that comes from me not pursuing more of the stuff that's just for me, because I do want to, and it sounds like you make that balance for yourself, that there's the work you do for clients. You also can continue to do work for yourself. And how are those different when you look at them? What's different about the work you do for yourself?
Well, okay, sidebar, off we go. Nola in New York 2 weeks ago because she won the watercolor award.
Congratulations.
Because I did a picture, I was doing a picture of a Jack Russell Terrier when the duck walks past. And I look at the duck and I see the duck and I think, he's cool. And I do the picture of the duck. The duck is now won in Vancouver, Vermont, and New York, and he's on a tour of the United States. Now, I did him totally for myself. The problem is, how do I repeat the experience? Whereas for the stuff with the sports guys, I've done close to 2,000 images for them. And yeah, when Rocco gave me the mortgage, I paid off the mortgage in 8 years, 10 months, and 9 days and 8 hours. Do I love what I do for Heritage Sports Art? No. But I'm really good at it, and doing it for all those years really caused the duck to be a better painting, because I had learned over the course of doing it again and again and again how to work with red in all the sports uniforms, because I had to match Pantone colors with watercolor. And they had to pass quality control in New York, Cooperstown, and Canton. And those guys know nothing about art. They just know whether or not the colors match.
Right. And that goes back to the way you described yourself as a technician, that you were trained and have continued to develop your skills.
I'm a high-end technician. I'm worth $50 an hour.
But there's no contradiction between being a technician and being an artist.
No, there's none. There's none. Anybody who thinks that just because you fling glops at paper is an artist is a bit wrong. Everybody has to learn how to fling the glops. I don't like acrylic.
You're a watercolorist.
I am. I do watercolor, pen and ink.
Okay.
Colored pencil, graphite. I do highly representational work, and it gives me a great deal of satisfaction.
So just from the example that you gave, would it be fair to say that the work you do for clients versus the work you do for yourself, I probably could, it's not a difference in, it might be a difference in subject, but it's mostly, okay, but styles of represent, the way that you work would be the same.
Yeah.
Okay. And even in terms of subject, how would it just be because the subject assigned to you, or do you do mostly animals?
I will do
Creatures?
portraits with people if there is an animal in the picture.
Okay.
And there's a really, for me, a big reason. First of all, I don't specialize in people portraiture, doing it in oils and acrylic. That's number one. Number two, most people think about what they look like because of what they see in the mirror. You see, the bottom line with me was, yes, I flunked grade 13 French, but when I got finished with OCA, lads leering at limp ladies lying in linen didn't inspire me. And that whole part of the arts world really didn't do a lot for me. And once again, I was always being told that I had to make it bigger and I had to do more abstracty type stuff. I had to do, and that was not what drove me. I had to make a living. I had to have remuneration. I had to be able to support myself. One of the things that you might not have covered in this whole thing with the story of Sheilah and Nola and Margot on the side, our father bought an empty lot of land in Muskoka. He didn't have boys. So therefore, we got to learn basic plumbing, electrical, and framing because we were his, as I call them, unpaid deckhands for his hobby. And it was very different, very, very different. That's part of the reason I was able to take on the house when it was a wreck.
I was just thinking exactly. You had some of those basic skills.
Well, basic knowledge. I wouldn't say skills. When you have the Greek construction guys looking at you and saying, yeah, and you look, that much there. That's what I want. Wives don't speak to their husbands like that. Well, you're not my husband, sir.
I think my biggest takeaway from my conversation with Nola was the value of standing on your own 2 feet. To learn more about Nola and her work, be sure to check out her website, merriweatherdesignstudio.com.